Well, how's everybody doing today? You guys doing good? So glad to have each and every single one of you hanging out with us today. I want to welcome those of you joining at all of our different locations. We're so glad that we get to hang out with you today. To those of you who are part of the .tv family, to those of you part of the Crossing Inside, to those of you watching online, I want to welcome you as well. And I know this happens at almost every single one of our locations, almost every single service, almost every single weekend. There is somebody who is hanging out with us for the very first time, and we are so glad that you're here. And my hope is that God will use the time we have together today to do a work in your life and draw each and every single one of us into a closer, more intimate personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Before we jump into the message, there are three things that are coming up in the life of our church that I believe would be impactful in your development as a Jesus follower. The first one is if you are a woman, we have an incredible event, women's conference coming up. Men, if the women in your life are very similar to the women in my life, they're always pouring out. And we need to create some space in their life where they get poured into. And so I'm gonna encourage you, men, create some space in their life for them to be able to go and be a part of this. Sign them up, make sure that they're going, because I want them to be blessed. But I also believe that after they've been blessed, like most of the time, women will end up being a blessing to you. So I want to encourage you to do that. The second thing that I'd like to talk to you about is we are going to be hosting a dinner here at our 48th Street campus. And we are going to be bringing in the missionaries that we support as a part of the Crossing from all over the world. We're flying them in, and we're going to be having a dinner where we celebrate the work that they're doing, and not only that, encourage them for all the work that they're doing. And we've got some seats available for that banquet. The way I signed up for this is whatever device you use to connect to the internet, in the search bar, I just typed in one mission dinner, and it brought up a list of websites. You'll click on the Eventbrite one, but it's on November 15th, which is a Wednesday night. It's from 6:30 to 8:30. The tickets are $20, and we're gonna be using that money to pay for the food that obviously you're gonna be eating, but we're also gonna be giving a big gift to every single one of our missionaries for all the incredible work that they do. And it would not only amaze you, but it would humble you to realize that we get to be in partnership with these people. They're flying in from all over the place, and the furthest people that have to drive are those of you who are joining us in Kirksville. So let's just make sure that while they're here, they feel loved and supported by this church. Jennifer and I are going. We're also bringing along our 18-year-old daughter, because I think it'll be really good for her to see what God is doing globally through this church. So we've bought our tickets, $20 a piece, and we can't wait to be here and hang out with you. The third thing that I want to talk about is, hopefully you're not sitting on it, but at all of the chairs, at all of our locations, when you came in, there should have been a piece of paper and a pen. And we've been talking about this for 2 weeks, but the International Conference on Missions, which is all the missionaries that are part of the Restoration Movement, which is what we're a part of, are going to be gathering in our backyard in Peoria. And there's going to be between 8,000 and 10,000 people that are going to be at this convention. And our church is one of the big supporters of this. And so we've actually gone ahead and we've purchased your registration for all of you at all of our different locations. And here's what I'd like to do right now. We're going to take just a couple minutes, and I'd actually like you to fill that thing out so that we can hold your spot. We're asking for every person to spend at least one day at this convention. I'm going to be there on Thursday and Friday and Saturday. I don't know if I get to stay there on Sunday. I love to eat, so if you swing by there, we'll go grab something to eat. I'd love to have 24 meals a day for 3 straight days. It could be fun. It could be really fun. So pull that thing out. I'm going to put the stuff up on the screen. The registration is actually not that complicated. I'm going to have you fill it out right now, every single one of you, so we can at least hold a spot for you, because you don't know. You might be going, we have no plans on going, but then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, we actually should go. I don't need nearly as much as you think I do. I need your first name, the name your parents gave you. Then I need your last name. So far, not hard. Then I need you to write your email address in. Now they're gonna send you your confirmation code. Once you fill this thing out, we're gonna send this off to people. They're gonna enter all this information in. You can actually be filling this out. I know you other locations are doing a much better job of filling this out than 48th Street. It's duly noted. You will get a tougher sermon now, 48th Street, okay? I want you to fill this stuff out, and then we're gonna send this off so that way they know that our church is supporting them and is serious. Let's go to the bottom of the registration form. I just need you to put your home church, The Crossing, that way they know it is free for you. And then I think that's actually all I need for you out of that. Go ahead and fill that out while you're sitting here. I'm gonna give you 2 more minutes to do that, because then what we're gonna do is we're gonna pass those to the edge of the aisles, and then there's gonna be people who are gonna come down and collect all of those. Our hope is that 1,000 of you are gonna go and be a part of this, because we believe that when you see what God is doing globally, it is gonna impact you in your relationship with Jesus Christ. And we're always looking for ways for us to grow. So I need your first name, your last name, your email address, and then obviously that The Crossing is your home church, okay? If you don't get that all the way done, you can leave it at the steps after service, but I'm gonna have you, those of you who've already done it, would you guys send them to the edge of your rows? And then there are people at all of our locations who are gonna walk down and collect all of those. It's a big deal, and as a church, we want to be doing everything we can to influence people in a relationship with Jesus Christ, and this is one of the ways that we can partner to do that. So you guys can pass it to the edge, and then the wonderful people that are collecting those will be there and get those from you. Now, let's talk about the sermon we get to go through today. We're in a series called The Truth About Everything. We did the book of Colossians. Now we're in the book of 1 Thessalonians, and then we're going to go into 2 Thessalonians. Now, when I started working on this sermon, I'll be honest with you, at first I wasn't all that jazzed about it. I read it, and then I read it again, then I read it again, then I read it again, and then eventually it started to do some work in my own heart. So specifically, if you're watching this and you're a pastor, you're an elder, you're a staff member, you're a campus pastor, you're a ministry leader, you're a difference maker, I'm hoping that this sermon really speaks to your heart as it obviously has been speaking to mine. If you don't fit in one of those categories, I'm gonna encourage you to take note and hang on, because I believe there's still some great things that God wants to say to you in this. But I believe that this sermon really kind of confronts those of us who have been committed in our relationship with Jesus Christ for quite some time. As you know, we recently relocated from the wonderful city of Macomb, love you guys, to Quincy, and we live in a neighborhood that is way more conducive to riding bikes. And so my boys were riding bikes all the time, and then my wife, I got her a bike, and so she started riding bikes, and then obviously it was Dad's turn. And the bike that I had, I'd purchased 15 years prior. It had been left in the basement, and it wasn't gonna work. And so I went to a bike shop here in town, and I was going through the process of purchasing a bike. Now, I didn't remember this happening, but it seems to me like bike seats keep getting smaller and smaller. Like they're designed by proctologists. It's getting a little ridiculous. And I'm going, it's the size of like a bulk mail postage stamp, and I'm supposed to put all 300 pounds on that much space. And I asked the guy, I said, what do we need to do about this? And he said, here's the rule, man. That seat will either break you or you will break it. So I guess I won. I walked weird for a while, but I'm doing fine now. But isn't that true that there are things that happen in your life that you either break them or they break you? You had some challenges relationally, and you either broke through it or it broke you and defined you. Maybe something happened financially for you. You either broke through that situation or that situation broke you. I called this sermon, or titled this sermon, Barrier Busters. Because I believe if we're gonna be the people that God called us to be, there are barriers that we need to break through. The gospel of Jesus Christ was never designed to just come to you. It was designed to go through you. And in order for it to do so, there are barriers that we must bust in our own relationship with Jesus Christ. And in the second and third chapter of 1 Thessalonians, I believe that Paul identifies 6 barriers that every single one of us must wrestle through and break through if we want to make a difference, if we want to leave a legacy. The first barrier is the barrier of discouragement. Listen to what it says. You know, brothers, that our visit to you was not a failure. We had previously suffered and been insulted in Philippi. Before they even got to Thessalonica, Paul went through hardship in Philippi. In fact, at the end of that ministry, there wasn't a huge, vibrant church there right when they left. They had baptized or spent time with Lydia. They had baptized the jailer, but they weren't welcomed with open arms. People weren't going, we're so glad that you've come here to save us. In fact, they met strong opposition. But just because they went through hardship did not deter them from doing more incredible things for the gospel. He says, our time in Philippi was not a failure. It was not in vain. It was not empty. But you know what's interesting is when you and I believe, look at our relationship with Jesus Christ and the things that we've tried to do on his behalf, we don't seem to have that same attitude. I've heard people say, well, I invited this person to church and they said no. So, I'm just, I'm done inviting people. Well, I invested in this person, but they were not a good steward of that investment and they flopped. Why is it that we let the people in our past answer all the questions for the people in our future? Just because one person said no, you're going to just stop inviting all the other people that might say yes? Just because one person was a bad steward of your investment, does that mean that everybody else is going to be a bad steward as well? I wonder if sometimes we forgot that Jesus calls us to a life of hardship and rejection and heartbreak, that is par for the course for a Jesus follower. Jesus offers us a cross, not tickets to Disney. He says it's going to be tough when you come after me. I am so glad that Paul was not the kind of guy who was easily discouraged. Because if you are easily discouraged, you're going to miss out on some of the most wonderful things in life. This Monday, we would be celebrating my 8-year anniversary with my wife, but I'm going on a trip and I scheduled it not realizing that was on our anniversary. Baller move, right? Listen to me. I'm celebrating 8 years, and when I asked her for her number, she gave me her friends. It's a good thing I'm not easily discouraged. Paul was the same way. He was preaching in a town called Troas, and it was getting late at night. He preached until midnight. Some of you have always said, boy, I wish we'd get rid of Clayton and Jerry and get the Apostle Paul to preach. Sucker, you'd be here till midnight. You'd be wishing for me at hour 3, okay? He's preaching till midnight. There's a guy in the back of the room, 3rd story up, who's listening to him, who falls asleep while the Apostle Paul is preaching. When he falls asleep, he's in his chair and he's leaning against the window. He falls asleep, falls out of the 3rd story window and dies. His name? Eutychus. It's easy to remember. Eutychus too if you fell out of a window. Okay, you'll never get that one wrong in Bible trivia. Now you know how I got through Bible college, okay? Now listen, the dude dies in the middle of his sermon. Paul goes down, raises him back to life, walks him back up the stairs, and keeps preaching. Paul is not the kind of guy who is easily discouraged. And if we're going to be the kind of people that Jesus wants us to be, we need to be the kind of people who can break through the barrier of discouragement. Listen to what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15:58. Therefore, my dear brothers, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourself fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord, everybody say this last line, is not in vain. I'm not necessarily a tattoo guy, but if I had the body type for a really wicked tattoo, Galatians 6:9 is one of those tattoo verses. Kids, I did not say that. Your parents are right. You can't get this tattoo. Don't use that. Galatians 6:9, listen to this. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest. Everybody say this, if we do not. I wonder how many of us have missed out on a harvest because we walked away from the field too soon. You got discouraged before the rains came. Bug flew right into my eye. I apologize. Sermon's over. Yeah, I'm not gonna get discouraged. I'm gonna break through, okay? No bug's gonna mess me up, all right? Someone's listening to the message here at 48th Street. You're off the hook from what you previously did wrong, okay? We've been missing out because we gave up too soon. We're supposed to fix our eyes on that which is eternal, recognizing that we are involved in something that has eternal consequences. When you look at the life of Paul, he was a man who was not discouraged. Listen to what John Phillips says about him. Stripes and imprisonment couldn't deter men like Paul and Silas. They were made of sterner stuff than to be turned aside from their mission by beatings and bonds. Men who could sing in the stocks with bleeding backs, cramped muscles, and an uncertain future were not the kind of men who would give up. Such men baffle Satan, beat them within an inch of their lives, and they sing for pure joy because they have been counted worthy to suffer persecution for Christ. Lock them up in prison and they pray. Turn such men loose and they evangelize the world. Set men like Paul at liberty and they will march into city after city with the gospel, shaking Satan's kingdom to its foundation. They will strengthen churches, win souls, disciple converts, engage in missionary work to the end of time. Kill such men, and you only promote them to glory. You give them a martyr's crown and a triumphant entry into heaven to receive a resounding welcome home. Those are the kind of men who follow Jesus Christ, and we share the same God that they serve. His strength can strengthen us, and if you want to make a difference, if you want to leave a legacy, if you want to expand the kingdom of God, we must break through the barrier of discouragement. The second barrier is the barrier of courage. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 2. We had previously suffered and been insulted in Philippi, as you know. But with the help of our God, everybody say this word, dared to tell you his gospel in spite of strong opposition. Let me ask you a question. When was the last time we had to advance the cause of Christ in spite of strong opposition? When was the last time we dared? When was the last time we were bold? And I know what you're thinking. Well, I'm going to be bold. I'm going to dare for God. And what I need to do is I need to dig deep within myself and I need to summon the courage inside of me to stand for the cause of Christ. But I need you to know this. You won't find the courage you need inside of you. Godly acts require godly power. Daring for God requires dependence on God. The strength that you are looking for is not found in you. It is found in Him. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10 says, finally be strong in the Lord and in, everybody say this, louder, His mighty power. If you want to dare on behalf of Christ, if you want to be bold on behalf of Christ, you will find the strength to do the daring, the strength to be bold in Him. That's the second barrier. We have to get over the barrier of courage. We must find it in Him so we can do it on His behalf. The third one is the one that I think is probably universal at almost all of our locations. It's the barrier of approval. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 3 through 4. For the appeal we make does not spring from error or impure motives, nor are we trying to trick you. That's what was happening in Thessalonica. There were people coming in trying to trick people, trying to do a bait and switch on them. And Paul's saying, that's not us. That's not what we're trying to do. In fact, on the contrary, we speak as men approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel. We're not trying to please men, but God who tests our hearts. It goes on in verse 6 to say, we were not looking for praise from men, not from you or anyone else. This barrier might be our biggest. Our desire for popularity and position is robbing us of our potential and our power in Christ. With people picking sides, news outlets shaming opposing views, Facebook comments polluting the web, we are content as Christians to go underground, to go incognito. We are content to blend into the fabric of society because we seek the approval of society, not the approval of our Savior. Jesus calls us to be a city on a hill. The world is trying to get you to be ordinary, and God is calling each and every single one of us to be uncommon. When you vote, when you post, when you comment, when you chime in on a discussion, are you trying to please the people you're talking to, or are you trying to please Him? This is not a permission slip to just start saying the things of Christ without the love of Christ. But are you seriously trying to contend for the gospel? Hear this statement: you cannot win a man's soul if you are consumed with their approval. I went to the same Bible college that Jerry went to, sat in the same preaching center that he sat in, and one of the things that they taught us is when you preach, you either make people mad, sad, or glad, or stay off the stage. And I think sometimes I can be too consumed with making you glad. Is your faith strong enough to endure a message that makes your heart mad or sad? Is my faith strong enough to preach one that would make you mad or sad? When you're reading through Scripture, you find things that you're doing that do not line up with what God is doing, and I only do things I like. So when God says, Clayton, you got to stop doing this, He's asking me to give up something I enjoy doing. And that should make us a little mad. If all I'm doing is reading the gospel to find out how good I am, I'm not reading what He wrote. I'm reading something else. But it's after I get mad that I start to get sad, because I realize the damage that's been causing me in my relationship with God and my relationship with others. And then, after I've been sad at the way I've been living, I become glad as His grace and mercy and forgiveness wash over me. It is time for us to look for the approval of God instead of the approval of man. The fourth barrier we have to get over is the barrier of proximity. We loved you so much that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well, because you had become dear to us. Paul wasn't just content to preach the sermon. He wanted to go home and then spend his life with them as well. Maybe you've heard the saying before that you can impress people from afar, but you can only impact them up close. Who sees you when your work clothes come off? Who sees you when your church clothes, which of course we don't really have church clothes, we're kind of a come as you are church, but when you get back in the car after you've been to church, who sees you in that environment? That's why life groups are so important, because it's when you start rubbing shoulders with other people, when you live in community, that not only do they help you become a better follower of Jesus Christ, but God in His power allows you to help them become better in their relationship with Jesus Christ. Of all the barriers as I was going through this is the one I feel like God has graciously helped me with the most. Jennifer and I, as soon as we got married, she had Kennedy, so Kennedy moved into the house. And we moved my sister into the house. Then my sister got married, so we moved Andre into the house. Then we had a kid, and then they had a kid, and then we had a kid. And then when they were getting ready to have a kid, we're like, get out of here. This house is full. You're on the streets. And when they moved out, we found a girl named Lisa. And Lisa moved in. I've tried to adopt her, but she's like, 20. But now Lisa's a part of our family. And in a couple months, 2 more people are going to move into my house. I love living in community. And one of the reasons is it makes me behave. You can't fight with your wife the way you want to when you got guests in the house. There's all sorts of things you want to say, but you go, shucks, dear. Oh, if only we could have done that differently, okay? I have strong words I'm thinking, but I'm saying these, right? That when you are in community with other people, it causes you to behave differently because you don't want them to see the depths of your darkness. The crazy thing is they still see it, but they also see you yearning for Christ. I think many of us are missing out on a gift that God gives to everybody by not being invested in community. If each of us were to take time, I took time in my final 2 years in Macomb. Every Sunday night I had time with a couple, and every Thursday night I made time with a couple, and those relationships became unbelievably dear. It was not a chore. And if each of us were to create some time in our lives to invest in others and have them invest in us, I believe we would be better for it. Barrier 5, the barrier of conformity. You are witnesses, and so is God, of how holy, righteous, and blameless we were among you who believed. For you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children, encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God who calls you into his kingdom and glory. He says, I call God and you as our witnesses. You know how we lived. I saw this on Facebook. It's an age-old question. If you were on trial for being a Christian, could your family produce enough evidence to convict you? Could your friends? Here's a tough one. Your coworkers. Paul calls God as his witness. Hear this. They weren't in community writing each other permission slips. Well, we're just fallen people just like everybody else. He said, no, call God, call all these people. You know how holy, righteous, and blameless we were. Now, I know that this side of heaven, we're never going to be as holy, as righteous, as blameless as we ought to be. But we can be moving in that direction. We should be getting more righteous, more holy, more blameless. To be those things is to be set apart, to be different, not to blend in. The 6th barrier is the barrier of commitment. For this reason, when I could stand it no longer, I sent to find out about your faith. I was afraid that in some way the tempter might have tempted you and our efforts might have been useless. 2 times in chapter 3 of Thessalonians at the very beginning, Paul says these words, when I could stand it no longer. He had helped start this church. He had moved on to go do work in another area. And when he could stand it no longer, he sent Timothy back because he wanted to get word. Are you still following Jesus? Have you been lured away from his plan and his purpose for your life? When I could stand it no longer, I had to find out. I had to know. I have a question for all of you. What can't you stand any longer? How committed are you to the people in your life? Who's the person who used to be sitting in your row that's not sitting in your row anymore? Who's the person that used to serve with you that you haven't seen serve in a while? Who's the person that you saw baptized that you're wondering, are they still around? Is someone still connected to them? Are they still growing in the relationship with Jesus Christ? Have you got to a point where you can't stand it any longer? That you have to text, that you have to call and say, what's going on? There was this deep sense of commitment that Paul cared about the people in his life who were trying to follow Jesus. And every single one of us, there's somebody that you know that needs a relationship with Jesus Christ or started out on the relationship with Jesus Christ. Can I encourage you to get over the barrier of commitment, to get to a place where you can't stand it any longer? That this week, maybe even today, you would reach out and go, what's going on? You'd schedule a meal and say, I just want to follow up with you. I care about you. We have got to figure out a way to get over these 6 barriers because there are people that need to hear the good news of Jesus Christ. I was in junior high in Fort Madison, home of the Terriers, which is a terrifying name for a basketball team and a football team. And I had just come out of private school. It's my first couple of months in a public school, and I had befriended the lunch ladies because women with ladles of food should be loved. And so I had also taken on the persona, which is not hard for many of you to struggle believing, of being the funny guy. And so I am sitting at the table, and I don't know how many of you are out there or that are like me, but I'm a big-time mouth breather, which means if you give me brownies with powdered sugar on top of them, when I get ready to eat them, I will take a breath and I will coat the inside of my lungs with powdered sugar. And I've always been like that. Well, I had taken these Doritos that I had conned out of the lunch lady, and it was taco day, and I had crunched up my bag of Doritos, and I had sprinkled them on top of the taco. And as I was getting ready to eat the taco, I took that one of those Doritos on a surprise trip into my windpipe, and it shut me down. Like, not part way, all the way. Like, there was no breathing happening. Now, the worst part about being the funny guy at a table is when you start choking, it's just par for the course. Like that Clayton guy, whoo, he's a hoot. And I'm wishing I could hoot. I'm wishing I could do anything. And it's starting to get dark. And there was a teacher who was up on the 3rd floor, and he saw me choking. And he hurried through people and around people, and he got to me. And fortunately, I was small enough in 7th grade that people could still get their arms around me. And he gave me the Heimlich, and then, I don't know, he needed to do this, but then he just hit me as hard as he could in my back. And we dislodged the rebellious Dorito. And ever since then, I am sensitive to the sound of people choking. My kids, when they choke, I'm more liable to go through a door than open it. When I'm in a restaurant and I start to hear it, I start to break out in a sweat. I'm ready to solve the problem because once you've been choked and you've been saved, you can't help but hear it when somebody else starts to do it. I get all clammy the moment it happens, even talking about it. And as a church, there are some of us here. There's some of us that remember what it was like before we found a relationship with Jesus Christ. There are some of us here that remember when our soul cried out for a relationship with Jesus Christ and were attuned to it. And so sometimes when you come up to us and you are complaining about the music and you're complaining about the lights and you're complaining about how we take communion and you're frustrated about where in the service we do the baptism video, sometimes I just want to say, I can't hear you over the choking because there are people that I'm trying to reach. There are people that we're trying to reach. Do you get what I'm saying? I feel like sometimes we're a bunch of lifeguards and we're hanging out on the pool deck and we're complaining about the fit and the color of the swimsuits and saying, hold on a second, somebody needs to go. We're not even supposed to be on the pool deck. There are people drowning in the deep end, and who will go and rescue them? Listen, if you have a preference about how we do church, chances are you know Jesus. Because lost people don't have that many preferences about how to worship Him. If you get hit by a bus today, your elevator goes up. This church is supposed to exist for people where the elevator goes the other direction. We're not trying to reach you. We're trying to reach your kids, your grandkids. We want to be a church that no matter who you run into on the street, you can say, I know a church that would love for you to go. That you don't meet anybody and you have to ask yourself the question, well, will this church love them? I don't care how rich or how broke they are. I don't care how lost you think they are. This is supposed to be a place for people to find Jesus. We're better than this. I know we are. When I think of the Crossing Church, I think of our core values: outward, downward, relevant, innovative. Nobody was more relevant, innovative, outward, and downward than Jesus. We are trying to model our church after the ministry of Jesus. And if we're not careful as a church, we could settle having the Word of God in our hands, but it never being in our hearts. It was Jesus who said, I did not come for the healthy, but the sick. And you know what I think? I think Satan uses that to kind of get us off of our game, because at the end of the day, I believe who we really are is not who we function as all the time. Because when I think of this church, I think of a church that would do anything to get to lost people. You would break barriers. You'd be like the Tasmanian devil who just leaves a hole in the wall trying to reach the next person for Jesus Christ. That we go through these barriers. We go over them, through them. We make sure that they don't break us for moments like this. There's some of you that were here and you've never started a relationship with Jesus Christ, and you somehow are still awake this late into the sermon because maybe it was for all the people around you, but listen to me, this part of the sermon is for you. Do you want to know why this church breaks down barriers? Do you want to know why this church is willing to exist for people who don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ yet? Is because I know that probably if you don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ, you believe this lie. That God and Jesus are out to punish you. They're out to get you. That they've got their thumb on you. Maybe you believe the biggest lie of all, and that is that God doesn't love you. But this church wants to break down barriers so you can hear this message. He loves you. You are loved by God. No matter who you are, no matter where you are, no matter what you've done, no matter what you're doing, He loves you. In fact, He sent His Son, Jesus Christ, to live a perfect and sinless life, to live the life that you and I couldn't live, to die a death that you and I couldn't die, to pay a price that you and I couldn't pay. And not just to show you how much He loves you, but to rescue you from the dominion of darkness. And after He had died on the cross, they put Him in a tomb, and then they put that big stone in front of the tomb to keep Him there. But we serve a God more powerful than the forces of evil. The creator of life overcame death, and the maker of mountains was not worried about a stone in front of a tomb. And on Sunday, He walked out to prove to you and me that life as we know it is not all there is. There is hope. There is mercy. There is grace that can be found in the arms of Jesus. And if you're at any of our locations, we exist to make sure that you know that message and you can make that message yours today. For the rest of you who are part of our church who already have a relationship with Jesus Christ, would you be willing to break down a barrier so somebody that you know, somebody that you love could hear that message? Because of that, we're moving to a time of decision.